This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn and I are talking about the process of self-discovery through our writing. And this topic came up as we were chatting between episodes because we just recorded the Writers Book Club where we discussed Ren Cedar Fuller's essay, Naming My Father. If you haven't read it or listened to that episode, there's definitely a journey of self-discovery through this essay. It's creative nonfiction, obviously, and we as readers take this journey of self-discovery with the narrator, and it got us thinking about self-discovery and writing more generally. So Kathryn?
I feel like this has come up multiple times. I mean, we talked about this in the previous month too with Fiesta 1980. I think it was Dave that mentioned that it felt very much like memoir, like he was working through this issue and that the writing was cathartic. And I feel like we talk about this a lot, this process of like using writing to really dig down into like maybe what you were feeling or how you have encountered something. And I think both in CNF and also in fiction, you can really wrestle with things that are personal and that are, have welled up out of something that maybe you didn't even expect. And the coolest part, I think, about the Ren Cedar Fuller essay was kind of feeling like we were going on that journey of self-discovery with her. We got that feeling of almost journaling and working our way through the emotions and the impact in throughout her life. And I think sometimes we forget that even the writing that we're doing, like secondary world fiction or way out historical or whatever, can really have an impact on what we ourselves are feeling, or maybe came out of a deep place within ourselves, and that using that writing to reveal that can be powerful both internally for ourselves and externally for our readers, to bring them on a journey that maybe they weren't expecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I have definitely experienced self-discovery writing CNF, writing personal essays. In my fiction, I know the questions I'm exploring are coming from a place deep inside of me, but I don't know if I can identify that place. It almost feels like they're more cultural questions or archetypal questions, like what does it mean to be a woman in this kind of society, or what does it mean to have or not have power? What does it mean to feel like you don't have home, home and all the trappings that go with that word and such. But it's not the same as writing a personal essay for me, where I say, here's this situation I've experienced in my life. Here's my journey through it. And then, composing a narrative in order to bring my journey to a reader.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think that's backwards. I think for fiction writers, I don't think we do that. I think CNF is that journey, right? You're composing that journey that you went on. I think for fiction writers, I think we do it backwards. I think we discover we want to write about something, and then through the process of writing, sometimes we can discover things about ourselves that reveals why we wanted to write about it in the first place. And I would argue that the themes that continue to come up for authors is because that's what they themselves are wrestling with throughout their lives, right? And so, and it's different in different stages. And as people mature and grow, they probably grow through different themes, right? And maybe this is some of the reason why I don't like reading certain genres as much as I like reading others, because I don't resonate with the themes and the things that they're wrestling with. And I think if you're not wrestling with some of these things as a person, then the fiction may not be as deep. Now, that doesn't mean it's not good, but it might not be as deep thematically because you yourself aren't struggling with those things in a real and honest way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And it's interesting to sort of reverse engineer looking at my own writing and saying, well, if this was the theme of this book, why did I write to that theme? What was I concerned about, or what might I be processing on some subconscious level in being attracted to that theme? And it's not that I want to, therapize myself, and every writer should do this. I just think it's interesting. I'm curious about what that attraction is and why this theme and why not that theme. And, if we look at the lifetime of our writing experience, have we switched themes? Have we resolved one question or issue and started to look to another one? Or as the world around us has changed, has our focus shifted as well? I certainly think whether, it's in like whatever the driver is, I'm always exploring questions through my writing. So it might not be a question of writing as therapy for a problem I have, but it's a problem I see in the world. That's a problem or a question of humanity.
Yes.
Right. And I can't understand why this thing, so I've got to write it.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to explore. And I think that's what gives us, the ability to have compassion and empathy, right? Is the ability to explore it from multiple sides and multiple angles, creating characters that encounter it in a different way than we may ever be able to encounter this situation. And I think for myself, I find that I'm exploring these ideas of like over and over and over again of family and creation of family that's not necessarily blood family versus, creating your own sense of family and belonging, and then tied in with this idea of justice and compassion. So you get these things that sometimes feel like they're in conflict, and how do you resolve them, and how do you create this, like safety zone, right? And so I think as I'm wrestling with that, it's because of what I'm seeing from the world, or it's because of what I've encountered in this situation or that situation that's informing maybe how I wrestle with them in the text. And then through that, I think I can find peace in my own situation, in my own family situation, right? And my family is great. And so like from an outside perspective, you look at me and go, well, why?
Right.
But I think I've discovered that there's stuff in there that I need to wrestle with. I didn't go into writing the stories that I'm writing thinking I need to wrestle with the idea of family, but it keeps popping up. And so I know that that's what I am wrestling with. And so I think to be honest about that in my narrative with myself changes and deepens the story and creates something that asks that question on a deeper level that hopefully more people can encounter and say, oh yeah, like I want to wrestle with that too, or that's something that they haven't thought about, or a different take on it that can inspire them to maybe have the same sort of wrestling and with an issue. I think that's what good fiction, good literature does. So sorry, I'm rambling. People.
No, keep going. Keep going. I love it. Yeah, it just makes me wonder, we say, well, we are not our characters, we're the writers, and the actor's not the character, right? And yet as the writer, we aren't assigned the role, we're creating the role. So what does that say about us? Like how?
No, but I think that's good, because I'm definitely not my character. Like if I look at my character on the page, like my protagonist, like her and I are not the same person, and that deliberately so, right? But the situations that I'm putting her in are the questions that I'm asking as a person. And I think having that distance from my protagonist is 100% necessary, because I can't be her. My life situation is different. The things that I wrestle with, I don't want her to be wrestling with those specific things. I want her to be wrestling with the deeper thematic things that inform all these other things. Right. So my protagonist is not a mother in her 30s with 2 kids. Right. That would be, it wouldn't work for my story. It wouldn't work for my situation. It wouldn't work for what I'm wanting to, explore. But we still have similar things that we have to work through, right? Our relationship with others, the way that we encounter the world, how things are viewed, or how we can change things, how we can impact things. And I think those are the deeper questions that I'm asking my protagonist to wrestle with, that then are universal, right? Universal human experiences. Right. Now, what are you going to do is the question. What are you going to do about it? And And my
Mm-hmm.
protagonist has the ability to act in a different way than I necessarily do. Right.
Right. Right. Well, and through fiction, we get to take that question that we're asking and blow it up into something dramatic, something exciting, compelling, whatever. It could be anything depending on the genre that we are writing. And so we can extrapolate that question from our lives into the universal and then make it specific in our stories and dramatize it in whatever way we choose to. And then it's for the reader to read that story, be entertained by it, and to see the layers and to connect with the theme, and then to take from that particular story the universal again, and then apply that universal to the individual's unique situation, to whatever's happening. That's actually really cool. I would like to diagram.
I know, right? Like, how often do you as an author sit down and think, I wonder, how is this going to translate into, it's a pretty cool thing that we have both the responsibility and the privilege to be able to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Totally.
You're speaking into other people's lives in a way that, that not a lot of people allow, maybe. Because it is fiction, or even like creative nonfiction or essays, things where people are encountering it. They get to encounter it on their own, without feeling like it's being, they can encounter it in their own time, on their own space, in their own, world. And so that way you have the opportunity to speak into that without it being in their face. They can encounter it as they want to. And if they don't want to, they can close the book, put it aside, and not go there again. And that's a beautiful thing.
My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. In December, I'll be giving my subscribers 21 Reasons to Pause. From December 1st through the winter solstice on the 21st, subscribers will receive a daily writing prompt and tip as an invitation to slow down and take 15 minutes out of the bustle of the holiday season to reflect and unwind. Prompts will be geared toward connecting with your memories and telling your stories, whether for yourself, your loved ones, or the world. It's perfect for everyone, writer or not. Right now, an annual subscription is 20% off and makes a nice gift for anyone who enjoys reflections on life, writing, and the writing life. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com. Yeah, and I wonder if there's something, if part of the magic of story is that the reader engages with the character. Like, that is what we do as humans. That is our relationship with story. We create this strong, empathetic connection. We bind ourselves to the character as we go through this story. And I don't think we do that when we just recount what happened to ourselves. If you told me what happened to you, I might be wowed by it. I might be moved by it, but I suspect it's not the same psychologically and emotionally as it is when we sit down and read a story, because of the fullness and the richness of entering that narrative and being transported ideally into that character's entire world and being, to really connect with the being, to identify with the being. We connect with each other, but I think with the story, there's an identification, perhaps.
No, I would agree with that. And I think this is why for some books, I just can't read them, or because I don't identify with that protagonist, or I don't identify with that point of view character. And then it throws me, and I don't care to know what they have to say, right? Or we've talked about this with ensemble casts before too. Like, give me too many points of view. I don't identify with all of them, right? I'm not in the story in the same way. And having that immersive experience, it can change the way that you think. It can change the way you encounter people. And I think that's so powerful and so important, because the more experiences you have in different people's viewpoints and different people's worldviews and different people's, experience of life, the better you have the ability to be an empathetic, compassionate human being, which I think is what we need in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And that is, as you said, privileged. That is our privilege. That is the role of the writer in society. It is to bring the opportunity for empathetic connection or identification with people who are completely removed from you, who are so different from you. You could never share in their experience any other way. It's only through storytelling.
And because it's internal and because you're playing it out in your own mind and it's individual, I think that's a unique experience. And this is why we started this whole conversation with writing as self-discovery. I think reading is also self-discovery. It's an individual thing that you are doing. There's very little, you could read aloud to your kids, or you could read an audiobook with multiple people or whatever, but most of the time you're going to be doing it individually. It's different than watching a TV show. It's different than watching a movie. It's different than having that kind of corporate experience. So I think it's just a very unique situation, both as a writer and a reader, that you put yourself in, because it's just so about you and the page.
Right.
Yeah. We don't do that often anymore. People don't do that. They don't sit in isolation. They don't sit in the quiet. They don't have that individual experience as much. I think we're losing maybe that ability to some extent to really like cut yourself off from the world and just exist in this quiet. And it's so valuable. So valuable.
Yeah. So how do we foster that culturally? I think individually, it's very easy to say, I'm going to turn off my phone. I'm going to put it in a box. I'm going to block out time, blah, blah, blah. I think we all understand the distractive power of technology. And I think we all know what we should be doing, but culturally, as humanity, right?
Yeah.
How do we come to an agreement that this is valuable, that this is something we need more of in our world?
Yeah. I have 2 young kids, right? And we are actively reading together. And I'm actively seeking out things that are not popcorn fiction. Arya's 5, guys. She's not reading Dickens, right? But we read like Beatrix Potter's Treasury, things like that. And like Winnie the Pooh, A.A. Milne, things that are older, things that have depth of language, richness of story. Not that you can't have that in newer popular fiction, but I find it harder. It's harder to find those kinds of stories. A lot of children's books that have been written lately are very you're awesome. You are the most wonderful you that has ever been, right? Like there's just a lot of affirmation, not a lot of story. I find it a lot harder to find deeper stories that my kids connect to.
Right.
And realistically, like at this age, she has so much imagination and so much, like she just really wants to connect. And so we'll be reading this story and I'm like, you don't understand half of these words, right? They're old words, we'll explain some of them, but most of them I just let ride. I just let her experience the story, and she'll come to the end of it and she'll go, oh, another one. Let's do another one. And she's in it. And she can tell me, oh, Mom, you remember that story about the cat that got stuck and the rats were going to eat it? And I'm like, you're 5 and I read you the story, but yes, I do remember that. But fostering that joy, right? Where it's not just about the show on Netflix or the show on Disney or the show on this or it's the story that I read you, the audiobook that you listened to, she's starting to read now, but she's not there yet. So it's mostly me reading to her. And
Right.
allowing them to be hard, allowing them to
Mm-hmm.
be things that she has to really concentrate on and listen to. And then she gets excited about it. And I don't know that that's
Yeah.
the answer for everyone, but I feel like as I'm raising this next generation, again, so much responsibility there. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
give them that meat, the meat and potatoes books, the literature that makes them think, that really
Right.
brings them into this world and says, wrestle with this, kiddo,
Well, yeah.
and let them do it.
What good is the affirmation pulp? I'm going to
I know,
say,
there's some really
right.
cute books, right? They're
I'm
great grandparent gifts.
right. It's not that having one or two on your child's bookshelf is
No.
a bad thing, but one or two with 20 or 50
Mm-hmm.
of the stories, the classics and the modern classics, where a
Yes.
child is invited to consider something, to problem solve, to
Mm-hmm.
expand understanding and awareness of the world, as well as vocabulary.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And my 3-year-old listens to them too. And she's just as captivated. It's funny. I
yeah,
mean, more examples I know, but like Little House on the Prairie, we're reading that one, and that's just someone else's experience, right? And they were in it.
mm-hmm,
And that's an
mm-hmm,
experience they'll never get to have. Like you can't have it anymore. Not really. I mean, I guess I could
right.
move them to the middle of the woods with a 1-bedroom cabin. That would be kind of irresponsible of me.
You
And
know,
I don't have the skills.
yeah. Well, then it would be irresponsible. Definitely.
But you
Yes.
know what I mean? Like and that is a totally immersive experience in someone
Mm-hmm.
else's life. And so, yeah, your question is so good about, how do we change this culture? And I
Yeah.
think to some extent it's raising the next generation to appreciate literature.
Right.
And I mean, I'm going to say that, of course, because I love literature and I love writing, but I feel like
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing that compares to that.
Yeah,
There
I
just
agree.
isn't.
And I think for us, those of us who are adults,
Mhm.
we need to, it's not enough to say raise the next generation,
No,
because unless somebody's in your situation with
you
children
can't.
to be
Yeah.
raised.
Okay, who do I raise?
Right. So right now I'm reading Thoreau's Walden, or
Mm-hmm.
Life in the Woods.
Gosh, it's been a long
And
time since I read that.
yeah, I've never read it before. It's been one of those classics on my list. It wasn't assigned to me in school, so
Mhm.
it's been on that list, and I finally picked it up and I'm reading it, and I've actually have a couple of reflections on
Mhm.
Walden in my Substack. If anyone's interested, shameless plug, a room full of books and pencils.
Wonderful.
Booksandpencils.substack.com.
There you
So
go.
there, I'll just get that out. But I wrote this reflection on one of Thoreau's chapters, the chapter reading, actually, is his chapter is titled Reading in Walden. And I thought, well, I don't know if anybody will care. I don't know if anybody else is doing this kind of reading or is interested in thinking about reading. But, if nothing else, I'm enriching my own life, and maybe somebody connects with it, and maybe it inspires somebody to read, or it's like what we're doing with the Writers Book Club. I think to promote introspection, thought, community, a more compassionate,
Yeah,
empathetic society, we need to not just read, but we need to talk about what we're reading. We need to share
exactly.
the ideas, right? And
Yeah. Become a book
yeah,
recommendation engine, right? Because
yeah.
sometimes people haven't picked up a book in a really long time. Right. And so then it
Mm-hmm.
becomes, well, what do I want to read? And I don't know. And it's hard. But if somebody recommends you a book or hands you a book, maybe they'll
Mm-hmm.
read it and then maybe that will spark something. They'll remember, right? Oh man, I used
Right.
to read so much. Why don't I do that anymore? So
Yeah. Well, and I think talking about the ideas that you encounter in the books,
yeah.
that's what's critical. Very briefly during COVID, some of us on my blog had a book club.
I love
and
it.
yeah, it didn't last long, sadly, but we read, I think it was The Invisible Half, The Vanishing Half. But it's set in the 1960s, I think 50s and 60s. And these two Black girls, I think in Louisiana, who can pass as white, leave their hometown and go to the city. And one of them ends up living her life as a Black woman, and one of them ends up living her life passing as a white woman. I think it's The Vanishing Half. And at the book club, we did talk about the book, but way more, we talked about the ideas that the book presented and what this situation means and all of the issues it raises and the questions about humanity and society and life and relationships and roots and culture and, choosing who you are and versus having who you are being chosen for you by appearances and such. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get this a lot. I mean, I'm kind of the writer literature nerd in my family or my group of friends. So people will be like, I read this book. What do you think of ... And then they want to have that conversation. Right.
Cool.
And I love that because again, that's exactly what you're talking about. All of a sudden we're encountering the ideas. And I love
Yes.
That.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about your books.
Yes. Yeah.
Recommend them and say, read this and come back. Read this and come back. Come talk to me.
Read more, think more, talk more.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So simple.
We've solved the world's problems.
We have. I think we have, actually. Yes. Read more, think more, talk more. That's it.
There you go.
Our December Writers Book Club selection will be getting us in the holiday spirit with a classic, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I hope you'll give it a read and join us. And if you would like to be at the round table discussing this book with us over Zoom, shoot me an email, alida@storyworkspodcast.com. We would love to have you join us. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.